What is self-worth really? How many of us truly understand what it means? The truth is, most of us don't, but that hasn't stopped us from spending nearly our entire lives trying to prove it in every possible way. And that is where the problem begins. When we measure self-worth by how much wealth a person has, we inevitably trap ourselves in a cycle of suffering. A company can collapse overnight, housing market can crash, a new technology can suddenly make a whole entire company lose its value at one night. High-level executives can be let go without warning. When we anchor our self-worth to wealth, which itself is anchored to such fluid external variables, we begin to live in constant fear. The same cycle of pain arises when we anchor our self-worth to anything external, whether it's money, achievements, or even the goals we set for ourselves. If the goal doesn't come to life, the ego sees it as a personal failure and concludes you must not be worthy. Or perhaps all the pain we've just talked about exists for one reason: to bring you to that breaking point, a moment so unbearable, so raw that it forces you to finally wake up. True self-worth is not something you can gain from the outside. It is something you feel within, not because you earned it, but because you are it. What is self-worth really? How many of us truly understand what it means? The truth is, most of us don't, but that hasn't stopped us from spending nearly our entire lives trying to prove it in every possible way. And that is where the problem begins. We chase recognition, achievements, validation, and success, all in an attempt to prove something we haven't even clearly defined without knowing what self-worth truly is. We fall into the exhausting trap of trying to prove it exists, constantly measuring, comparing, and questioning whether we have enough of it. This unconscious pursuit leads to a life filled with anxiety, disappointment, and a sense of emptiness, because no matter how much we achieve, it never feels like enough, since we're trying to prove a value we haven't yet truly understood or embraced. So how we learn to equate self-worth with net worth? As we grow up, we unconsciously absorb ideas about self-worth from our parents, society, and workplaces. And often the definition we inherit is disturbingly literal. Your self-worth equals how much you are worth in monetary terms. The university you attend signals your starting salary. Different schools and majors mean different pay grades. That starting salary leads to different job positions, which in turn affects promotion opportunities. Within less than a decade after graduation, you start to see significant divergence in income levels across individuals. From that point on, people's perceived worth in the market begins to split wider and wider. For those who choose to start their own companies, the moment their business reaches a valuation, let's say several billions, their stock holdings rise accordingly. Suddenly, their self-worth gets publicly translated into a dollar figure, perhaps hundreds of millions or billions. And so the logic continues. The more money you have, the more valuable you are as a person. By this logic, children born into wealthy families automatically inherit greater self-worth than those born in poverty. And people who can afford to buy luxury bags, private jets, mansions, and sports cars, do they inherently possess more self-worth than those who can't? Most of us, if asked directly, would rationally reject this idea. But emotionally, on some deeper level, we have internalized it. We find ourselves caught in a contradiction. We insist that self-worth isn't about money, that no person's value should be measured by their wealth. Yet in practice, our beliefs and behaviors often tell a different story. Why tying self-worth to wealth leads to endless suffering. On a deeper level, when we measure self-worth by how much wealth a person has, we inevitably trap ourselves in a cycle of suffering. That's because money is not a fixed entity. It is a constantly shifting form of energy. Our financial standing is always fluctuating, moving in cycles of gain and lose. The amount of wealth we have is often tied to external, ever-changing factors. A company's valuation, one's job titles or rank, the rise and fall of the stock market, real estate prices, followers counts, or whether the industry you work in is trending or in decline. And we all know none of these things stay the same for long. A company can collapse overnight. Housing market can crash. A new technology can suddenly make a whole entire company lose its value at one night. High-level executives can be let go without warning. Even a celebrity with hundreds of millions of followers might one day lose interest in continuing their career. When we anchor our self-worth to wealth, which itself is anchored to such fluid external variables, we begin to live in constant fear. When we lack money, we fear for our survival and easily fall into a state of low energetic frequency, doubting our own worth, sometimes even believing we're worthless. When we do have money, we live in fear of losing it. And worse, we may start to believe we're inherently more valuable than others, falling into arrogance, believing we are superior, or even that we can control other people's destinies. But fear, shame, and arrogance are all powerful forms of negative energy. They keep us trapped in low vibrational states and attract more of the same, more negative people, situations, and emotions. In short, when we equate self-worth with how much money we possess, we fall into fear-based, scarcity-driven way of living that becomes nearly impossible to escape. Why even purpose and goals can't define your self-worth? The same cycle of pain arises when we anchor our self-worth to anything external, whether it's money, achievements, or even the goals we set for ourselves. Many manifestation teachers encourage people to focus all their energy on a specific, clearly defined goal. The idea is that the more precisely you define your desire and focus your thoughts on it, the more you align yourself with a high-frequency version of who you want to become. In doing so, you supposedly attract high-frequency people, situations, and outcomes into your life, leading to the fulfillment of your desires. In other words, your dreams become true. There's nothing inherently wrong with this approach, but the danger comes when your sense of self-worth becomes dependent on whether or not that goal actually manifests. If the goal doesn't come to life, the ego sees it as a personal failure and concludes you must not be worthy. If the goal is achieved, the ego quickly loses interest and starts chasing the next thing. Why does it do this? Because ego was born the moment we separated from our mothers at birth. That primal experience of disconnection created a deep fear and sense of vulnerability. Ever since, the ego has worked tirelessly to secure attention, safety, and resources to ensure its survival. As adults, our ego still hasn't recovered from that original wound. It continues to push us to seek validation, power, and status, not because we truly want them, but because the ego is terrified of what might happen without them. Its hunger is endless, like a black hole. It consumes our life energy, trapping us in cycles of striving and dissatisfaction. This is why self-worth can never depend on whether we achieve a goal. Yet most of us still tie our worth to the size and success of our pursuits. This is one of the key reasons why life so often feels painful, exhausting, and hollow. Even more tragically, many of the goals we work so hard to achieve aren't even ours to begin with. They are reflections of our family's expectations or society's approval metrics. When we equate our self-worth with how well we meet others' expectations or outperform our peers, we enter a loop of relentless pressure, fear, and comparison. Eventually, the pain becomes unbearable, and when it reaches a breaking point, maybe even past what we believe we could survive, something inside us wakes up. Or perhaps all the pain we've just talked about exists for one reason, to bring you to that breaking point, a moment so unbearable, so raw, that it forces you to finally wake up. And when you do wake up, you see it clearly, maybe for the very first time, that everything you were taught about self-worth, everything you believed and internalized from childhood until now, was completely wrong, entirely backward, utterly upside down. Self-worth cannot be earned, it must be felt. As long as we continue to define self-worth through the lens of the ego, using logic, comparison, and mental calculation, we will never truly understand what it really means. Real self-worth cannot be earned through effort, chased through constant actions, or gained by pushing yourself beyond the limits of your own well-being. Any attempt to prove your worth through doing is ultimately as meaningless as monkeys trying to catch the moon's reflection in water. No matter how hard they try, they come up empty-handed. True self-worth isn't something you can acquire, grasp, or prove. It is something you've always had. It existed before you were born. It has never left you, and it will continue to exist long after your physical body is gone. It cannot be seen or measured. It defies all the logic, labels, comparisons, or external validation. Self-worth is not something the mind can analyze. It is something only the body and the heart can feel. So how do you begin to feel your self-worth? It can be as difficult as it is simple. Just sit down, close your eyes, and be still. Almost instantly, your ego will flood you with thoughts. fears, plans, judgments, memories. That's totally okay. Keep practicing. Even 5 minutes a day is enough. And one day, within one of these 5-minute sessions, something quiet happens. A single pause between your thoughts open up. You find yourself asking, who am I? Am I this thought? No. Then am I the one experiencing the thought? Maybe. Then who is observing the one who is experiencing? Keep asking. Peel back each layer like an onion, thought by thought, identity by identity. Eventually, you touch something still and silent, something that does not need to be anything other than what it is. That is your true self. That is where your self-worth lives, eternal, unshakable, beyond values. It has always been there, quietly waiting for you to feel it. This is why true self-worth is not something you can gain from the outside. It is something you feel within, not because you earned it, but because you are it. Your true self is your self-worth. The true self you begin to feel in those quiet moments, that is your self-worth. This true self goes by many names: the higher self, the soul, the heart, the one, the universe, the source, God, divine intelligence, and many more. It is the part of you that remain eternally connected to infinite wisdom. It is not separate from the source. It is a fragment of the source itself. Because the source cannot fully experience itself as a singular whole, it expresses itself through countless individual forms, each one a spark of consciousness housed in a body like yours and mine. Through us, the source gets to feel, to learn, to evolve, and to become aware of itself through the richness of embodied life. As the Bible says, God created man in his own image. In Chinese mythology, the story of Nuwa tells us that the goddess shaped human being from clay in her own likeness and gave them life. One of the core teachings of the Buddha is that every being carries Buddha nature. The moment a person awakens to their true self, they realize the Buddha has always been within. They are the Buddha. So when we meditate, write, move through yoga, walk in nature, or simply rest in the stillness of our being, we begin to feel that presence within. And in that moment, we merge into the source itself. We become one with all that it is. There is no healing more powerful than that union. From the moment we are separated from a mother's body, we begin living under the control of fear, a fear born from that primal experience of disconnection. That fear gave rise to the ego, which since then has been driving our lives through a constant sense of lack, striving, and the deep belief that something is missing. But when we reconnect with our true self, when we feel the source within, we return to something ancient and familiar. In that moment, we merge into the source itself. We become one with all that is. And with that reunion comes a quiet joy, a deep peace, and the unmistakable feeling of finally coming home. In that moment, as we feel ourselves already held and unconditionally loved by the universe, our self-worth naturally reveals itself, unshakable, absolute, and whole. You won't question your self-worth anymore, just as you never question the steady beat of your own heart. Unconditional love is the soil where self-worth grows. By now, we may have begun to realize that self-worth can only truly be felt when we are able to sense ourselves as already unconditional loved and accepted. But when we pour our energy into reaching outward, grabbing, proving, striving, in order to earn conditional love from the world around us, we actually move further away from the very thing we're seeking, a self-worth that is real, steady, and lasting. If we're still trying to meet our parents' expectations just to gain their approval, if we're still chasing performance targets at work to satisfy our boss, or forcing ourselves to conform to social norms so we appear acceptable and likable, then no matter how much praise we receive, we won't touch the truth of our self-worth. Even if there's a moment when praise or recognition make us feel full of worth, maybe even a little arrogant, that feeling doesn't last. Soon, we find ourselves caught in the cycle again, trying to hold on to approval, afraid of losing it. When others are disappointed in us, it feels like our worth is crumbling. And so we live in fear, but we cannot live our entire lives without ever disappointing someone. So if our self-worth is tied to pleasing others, it will remain fragile, easily shattered, and always at risk. But when we feel unconditionally loved, something entirely different begins to unfold. We feel safe in our being. We feel no judgment, no labels. Whether we are more or less, loud or quiet, large or small, brilliant or awkward, we know we will not be rejected. We're not loved less for failing or falling short. And in this space, we finally begin to feel our own priceless self-worth. From that love comes peace. A quiet confidence settles in. We no longer feel we must earn love because we already have it. And when we no longer longer fear losing it, we are free. We feel our hearts filled with love. And from that fullness, we begin to share it naturally, generously, without effort. We start to love ourselves gently, without harshness, without shame. We respect ourselves, believe in ourselves, and are finally able to see our own talents and brilliance. With wonder, we begin to recognize the unique gifts that have always been inside us. We feel free to explore what we've drawn to, not to meet expectations, but to follow our curiosity and passion. And from that space, we begin to live out our self-worth effortlessly. Abundance flows from the source effortlessly. This kind of unconditional love isn't something we can beg or demand from the outside world, not even from our parents. It may not be something we ever receive from others at all, but the moment you merge with the source, with oneness, with your true self, you begin to feel it. A love that is endless, unconditional, and always flowing. The source doesn't punish you for mistakes, doesn't define or abandon you, and doesn't care about your worldly success or failures. It simply stays with you, quietly guiding you from within. Don't just take this as an idea. Try creating, write, sing, draw, build Legos, whatever brings you joy. When you enter a state of deep flow, you are merging with the source. What comes through you in that moment will often surprise you because it doesn't come from your logical mind. It far surpasses anything your mind could plan or control. What you create carries the unmistakable imprint of the source itself, pure, loving, and alive. And in that moment, you will feel your self-worth not as something you strive for, but as something you simply live effortlessly. As you spend more time in this space of flow, your life becomes a natural expression of your true self. Each creation becomes a reflection, like light passing through a film reel. Your true self is the real. Your work is simply the projection. Creations born from this alignment carry powerful energy. They naturally attract the people, events, and resources that match their frequency. Just like that, abundance is lived out by you effortlessly.